I need a new angle. My phone is currently on an upside down Hydro Flask. Innovation that excites. Hello everyone, my name is Hunter, this is a book hunter. It's been a long time since I've made a video. For obvious reasons, I'm in college. University in general is pretty hard, pretty time consuming, and unfortunately this channel takes a place on the back burner as I'm doing other important things. But I'm here and I'm ready to talk about books with y'all. So the premise of this video essentially is I just want to give you a rundown on what I've been reading, what I am doing for school, and what I hope to read soon. So if you're new here, my name is Hunter and I am a sophomore at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am studying both history and comparative literature. So I read a lot of books for school. So first I'm going to show you essentially the books I've been reading for school and my opinions on them. So first I'll just give like a pretty basic generic rundown of the books I read for my history classes. So I'm in a Vietnam War history class, and so we've been reading these three books interchangeably. This is just a short, concise history of the Vietnam War. Pretty good, basic. Lots of substance, but not really like, anything like hard-hitting. It's just factual, really. But on the contrary to that, we've been reading Vietnam's American War. Also factual, but I say it is more hard-hitting because I'm gaining a point of view that isn't really taught in Western education. I don't know, it's just nice to look at things from a nuanced point of view. So this is, of course, talking more about Vietnam as a whole and centering the story on the people who were most impacted by the war, which is crazy, crazy how could we dare center the story on them. But anyways, pretty good understanding. And then this is just a primary source collection of documents from mostly American sources, I will say. I'm already knowledgeable on the Vietnam War, so it's more of an introductory history course. It's easy, but I feel like I'm learning more about the war, but obviously not as much as I would if it was a more focused class. But I'm enjoying it. With the class, we're watching the Ken Burns documentary, which I've already seen about half of it, and I really enjoy that documentary. I highly recommend that anyone who can watch it. My other history course, we're reading a bunch of books, but I don't have any of them physically. My other history course is a history of the economy and environment in China. So very niche. This past week we talked about the timber trade in late imperial China. Sounds like something that may be boring, but it was actually pretty fun, and the professor wrote a book on it and we read part of her book. So I'll show that book cover right here just to give a plug to my professor because I really admire her. If you're interested on the timber trade in late Qing imperial China, read that book. Now for my literature classes, I'm in two literature classes. I'm in a German literature class and I'm in a Russian literature class. I'll start with the Russian lit class because we're actually only reading one book this semester, and that is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This beautiful edition from Oxford World's Classics. War and Peace. I had this beautiful edition. I got it damaged because it was in my backpack when it was storming and like the cover is starting to roll up. But whatever, love a good worn book. But let's see, I'm currently about 135 pages into this, but I need to be 479 pages into it. So I'm a little bit behind, so I'm trying to catch up on that this weekend. It's easy to fall behind, and the more you fall behind and you push it off, the easier pages build up of the chapters that I'm supposed to, just to keep up with the class and the discussion. And this book is probably one of the most intimidating books in all of literature. Makes sense, it's 1,300 pages, and it's a pretty dense book, but I found that it's actually surprisingly digestible. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of content. So I don't know, if you're interested in learning about the Russian aristocracy, that's the word. If you're interested in learning about the Russian aristocracy during the Napoleonic Wars, this is a really interesting book. But even if you're not interested in that specific topic, just Tolstoy is very good at just writing life, very good at just explaining how life is and the philosophical considerations of just living one's life. Lots of moral issues going on in this book. Lots of good characters that are hard to pinpoint until about 200 pages into it, and I feel like you can get a pretty good grasp of all the characters. Tolstoy loves his tangents. There's like essentially like essays within this book, but it's all worth it. Like Tolstoy is probably going to end up being one of my favorite authors, and I just love Russian lit in general. I'll show you some of the books that I read outside of class after this section. Part of living in the city is I constantly hear sirens. So my German literature class is called Great German Works in English, and it essentially surveys all of German literature from the medieval to the modern period to contemporary period, and we just read some books every now and then. So the one I've read already is the Nibelungenlied, which doesn't have an author, it's an unknown source. And this is a medieval epic poem, although we read it in prose form. I mean, it was decent, it was okay, it got a little repetitive. Essentially, this was written for an audience that would have been wealthy and would have been politically important. They would have probably been at a court for a reason. So it played towards that audience, so it's not my cup of tea per se. It didn't really have anything of substance, in my opinion. It was just men fighting for the charms of women, showing off wealth, lots of talk of like clothing in this. So if you're into that and you're into fantasy, like you can obviously read this to see how it inspired the fantasy genre, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary to get a good grasp on what German literature is. But a book I am enjoying a lot more is my current read in my German literature course, and that is The Sufferings of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I'm not very good with German pronunciation, so if you are a German viewer, please forgive me. But this is really interesting. It's a epistolary. It's a novel written in letters of this young man to his friend. I'm sitting down now. You see this guy slowly go insane and allow his emotions to overtake him, especially his emotions considering his unrequited love. You know, one of those tropes that are commonly used in literature, and you see how this unrequited love kind of plagues him and plagues his emotions, and I don't know, it's a deep book, lots of content warnings, so I definitely recommend kind of like looking into this before you try to tackle this. But the prose is beautiful. I've been underlining a lot of prose. Let me see if I can find something. I am alone and glad to be alive in this place which is made for souls like mine. I no longer want to be influenced, encouraged, inspired. This heart of mine rages enough by itself. Very angsty. This is like, I feel like this book is the definition of angst, and like this naive angst that honestly I could see its influences on a lot of just like existentialist literature, and this is like, I understand why this is an important work in the German literary canon, so I don't know, and it's really short too. I'm probably gonna finish it today. The only book I've completed recently for fun, it has been a rather short one, and also conveniently, also a German translated work, and that is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Again, my German pronunciation is not the best, but this is a more contemporary German book. I think it was written in the 50s. Let's see, it was published in 51, yes. So, pretty good book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It actually really resonated with me. If you are into, Germans love philosophy naturally, so if you want good philosophical fiction, this would be a really good starting point, because this is probably a defining novel in existentialist literature. It's essentially about this young man named Siddhartha, who is the son of a Brahmin, so he kind of has the whole story of Buddha. But it's kind of like, takes the story of Buddhism and kind of turns it up on its head, because with the story of Buddha, you have this man who leaves this religious life and finds out that like the way to live life is to like stop suffering until you eventually stop suffering and reach nirvana, essentially. But this is like, kind of takes that and adds some elements to it, and it's just about this young man who is struggling to find life and be content with life, and eventually he realizes that, like, I don't know, this constant quest for contentment, for happiness, for seeking knowledge of the world can be quite dangerous, or can be quite detrimental to one's livelihood. It's a really good book, definitely could be read in one sitting, and lots of philosophical questions arise from this. So if you like books that often leave you with more questions than are answered, then this book is an amazing, phenomenal read, and I highly recommend it. So now I just want to talk about books that I guess I want to read soon. Oh, another book I'm currently reading though before I get into that. I'm currently reading, listening to Games Without Rules by, I think it's Tasmin Amari, or Tamin Amari. Tamin Asmari, I think is his name. I'll leave the cover right here. It's a book on the history of Afghanistan. I'm really interested in Middle Eastern history, specifically on how the Middle East has basically been a proxy for global imperialist fights and continues to be a proxy for imperialist fights. And I don't know, it's just like a lot of times people in the Middle East lose their humanity because of greedy economic interest, greedy power interest, political interest, and I don't know, I just like really like centering the story on humans and the people most affected by these catastrophic changes throughout history. So I'm really liking that book. I'm currently 80% through with it, and we're getting to the more modern stuff, the rise of the Taliban, and I don't know, I'm a history major, as I said, so this is actually a field that I'm considering going into myself. So if you want a good history on how Afghanistan got to where it is today, I would recommend reading that. The book I'm reading for fun that is fiction is Mrs. March by Virginia Faito. I am currently 50 pages from finishing it, so I might finish this today too if I have time. This is kind of, I would describe a thriller, a psychological thriller about this woman named Mrs. March who is the wife to a best-selling author, and she discovers that the most recent novel he wrote, one of the main characters, she believes was based off of her. She doesn't like this character. She hates this consideration that this character may have been based off of her, and she kind of goes insane based off this and starts believing her husband is a murderer, and which I don't know if it's true yet, I'll find out. It's kind of slow. I don't know, it's a good book, and it's fun to read. It's just like, it's 200 pages, and it's almost wrapping up, and I'm just like, the build-up, I don't think the end game is going to be worth the build-up, but I'll let you know in my wrap-up. And then for nonfiction, I'm also reading How to Change Your Mind, What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence by Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan is one of my favorite modern-day intellectuals. He is a science writer, and he's really unconventional and likes to push boundaries within the science community, and this is exactly what this does. It kind of tries to disregard some of the, or upheave some of the stereotypes, focusing on the class of drugs, the psychoactive drugs, psychedelics, such as LSD, magic mushrooms, and DMT, and he tries to explain the cultural history behind these drugs, how a lot of them were actually based in indigenous cultures. So he talks about this in his book, and he talks about how they actually have really good therapeutic benefits, and how really the criminality of them from the war on drugs is what's caused, I don't know, it's caused a lot of damage in the sense that these drugs could potentially be used medically. And I'm saying could, but honestly they are. They can be used for good, but because of the criminality and honestly the racism behind it, the racism and the political aspects behind it, I don't know, it's very just disheartening that we've allowed it to get to the situation it is right now. So I don't know, really recommend this book if you're at all interested in the science of psychedelics. And just a rundown on the books I'm going to be reading soon. This will be the next work we're reading for my German literature class. This is the Tales of Hoffmann, E.T.A. Hoffmann, and we're going to be reading The Sandman from this collection, and he's like almost like a gothic horror author, so I'm really excited. Gothic horror is, I'm always intrigued by gothic horror, and I'm really interested on a German take in gothic horror, because I feel like German gothic horror may be really intriguing, so look forward to my opinions on this. And then I recently discovered in one of the libraries on campus these collection of tiny penguin classics. So I want to get through some of these soon. These are two Russian short stories by Chekhov and Tolstoy. How Much Land Does a Man Need, which is a later Tolstoy